Just sitting here in Albany right now, enjoying this wonderful time here in Albany and just looking over the river right now. I'm sitting up in the main area and looking forward to sharing today on this journey of the return threshold and actually sharing about the crossing of the Jordan and the crossing of the return threshold. So interesting times, and there's like so much to share, but so much that I almost don't know quite what to say and what not to say today. There's just so much being revealed, so it's great times. So before we start, who would like to read the prayer of Yeshua? I'm going to do the sheets. Okay, who'd like to read the prayer of Yeshua?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Oh, somebody else wants to, that's fine.
It's only me, you go.
Okay. All right. O thou from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration, may your light be experienced in my utmost holiest. Your heavenly domain approaches. Let your will come true in the universe where all that vibrates, just as on earth that is material in the deeds. Give us wisdom, understanding, and assistance and discernment for our daily needs. Detach the fetters of faults and karma that bind us as we let go of the guilt of others. Let us not be lost in superficial things like materialism and common temptations, but let us be freed from all of that which keeps us off from our true purpose. From you comes the all-working will, the lively strength to act, the song that beautifies all and renews itself from age to age. Amen.
Amen.
Sealed in trust, faith, and truth, and I confirm with my entire being.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine. So today's word, I just tuned in and I got this very interesting one, which I'm going to show you from the Book of Jubilees. It's an ancient scroll that they say that much of the Bible was actually written from and highly revered by the Hebrews. And so in the Book of Jubilees, it talks about in chapter 10, and it uses Jubilees as time reference points, which are 50-year cycles, basically. So the original Hebrew manuscripts highly revered the Jubilee, or what's called the 50-year cycles that we go through, which by and large, we still go through today, but that's another message entirely. So when we go to verse 5, this is talking about the time of the sons of Noah and at the time of the great flood, and how what happens after the flood. You'll see in the first verse, it says, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah and to make and to err and destroy them. Something that's still happening today, the demons, the unclean spirits and the negative entities, which we're now experiencing hitting the earth on an unprecedented scale, and which those of you who are sensitive to energy would be feeling and seeing. And so you can see here it says that the sons of Noah came because of these spirits, these demons, which were leading people, the sons of man and sons of the daughters of Noah astray, which was happening after the flood back thousands of years ago. And as it says, told him concerning the demons which are leading astray and blinding and slaying the sons of his sons. So Noah prayed, and you can see here, but as you go down here, verse 5, and you know how the watchers were in the book of Enoch, in chapter 6 of the book of Enoch, explained to be the angels or the archangels and spirits that were given the task of overseeing the earth and keeping an eye on this whole project or experiment or thing that was going on planet Earth, the recreation. And how in the book of Enoch, it explains how the watchers, 200 of them, being 1/3 of the 600 watchers that were assigned to watch over Earth, got basically lured away with the beauty of the women on Earth and came and did interbreeding and took over the Earth, which created the Nephilim and caused all the problems, but many of the problems on Earth which we now have today. And so that's when it says the watchers, that's what it's talking about. So it says, And I know how the watchers, the fathers of these spirits, acted in my day, and as for the spirits which are living, imprison them and hold them fast in the day of condemnation, and let them not bring destruction on the sons of your servant. And let them not rule over the spirits of the living, for you alone can exercise dominion over them. So basically what's happening here is the spirits or demons that have come out of this whole horrendous interbreeding experiment that had all passed over from death during the flood were still causing havoc in the fourth dimension in the astral realms. So this is what's happening here. It's talking about the major havoc that's being caused by these unclean spirits, which no doubt many of you are still, who are sensitive to energy, still feel and see and observe these spirits. And if you don't see that realm, you can see the effects of it upon Earth right now. And what's interesting is what it says here. So in verse 7, it says, the Lord God bade us to bind all these spirits. And in fact, in the book of Enoch, it talked about how that was happening. But then there's something very interesting in verse 8, which is the word I've got more for the day. And this is, so the chief of the spirits, it says, Mastema, came and said, Lord Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them hearken to my voice, and do all that I say unto them. For it says, for if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption, leading astray before the judgment, for great is the wickedness of the Son of Man. And verse 9, he says, and he said, let the 10th part of him remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. Now, when you actually read further, and then in verse 10 it says, and one of them commanded to teach Noah the medicines, for he knew that they would not walk in uprightness. Now, you have to go and actually explain and read all of the Book of Jubilees. But what this is pretty much saying is this. If you go on to read the rest of it, you'll see numerous references to medicines, like in verse 12, and we explain to Noah all the medicines. So the warning was that because of the karma and the horrendous wickedness or turning away of mankind away from the higher laws and the higher truth, that there was a decision that was made to allow many of the unclean spirits and demons to remain on earth to do testing upon people, to basically thresh out those who, in a way, were not worthy of being part of a new earth or a new evolved earth. And not only the Bible, but the Buddhist teaching, the Bhagavad Gita of the Hindu, and the Keys of Enoch, when you read that book, talks about the fact that there's a great threshing that's allowed to take place, or a great judgment, and it says to determine those who are perfected, or in a sense, pure enough to be part of a new evolved earth, which to me has always made sense, because if you pretty much let people in our current state go into a new evolved earth without changing our consciousness and who we are, we'll just take the same patterns of swindling, abuse of the earth, of the plants and everything. So what it's saying here is the demons, the spirits of darkness were permitted to remain, to be part of threshing those, for it says for corruption and leading astray. In other words, to separate out. So in a way, we are part of a great separation that's taking place right now, a moving apart, so to speak, a testing to see who is going to be part of a new pure earth or way of being, and who's going to be basically refuse to change in their behaviors and get caught up in them. So most of you probably never heard of this book before. So I just thought I would introduce you to it, the Book of Jubilees. Very interesting book, and like I said, it's been around for a fairly long time. So yeah, so anyway, that's the word for the day. Any comments before we continue on, or if not, I'll just keep going. Any questions on that? Anyone need any explanation? What's very interesting is, though, notice that there was a promise given to Noah to teach him medicines and healing remedies. And that is why many now have moved onto the path of healing remedies, because, in other words, the result of allowing these spirits to remain upon earth would be great sickness, great misfortune, great pain and great sorrow. And you can see that also in the ancient Aesop's fables of Pandora's box, of a fable about a release of a box which contained misery, spirits and everything. Okay, so no one's saying anything? Okay, I'll keep going then. So we've been covering the dark night of the soul, and that message, what I just shared, Ben, leads beautifully into what today's message is about, which is the return of the threshold. In other words, that coming back. So after you've been through that dark night and that time of great sorrow, that time of great tribulation, so to speak, to prepare for your path and to prepare for your mission, but you come back to serve humanity. And the more I've been doing this hero's journey and teaching this over the last 4 months or so, it blows my mind, to be honest. I actually, it so relates to my own journey, and I can see pretty much every stage I have walked and lived this. So the dark night of the soul just becomes before revelation. When everything is lost and all seems darkness, then comes a new life and all that's needed. This morning I was sharing with some people that we're still at a state right now where much of humanity is starting to awaken, but not fully yet. And that is why it's generally that moment when all hope is lost, when everything is dark, when you just don't see any way through, but you let go of your own ego or your own will or your own way of doing things, and you just realize, like, not my will, but yours. Those words that Christ said in the Garden of Gethsemane, that your will, God. In other words, senior management, Father, Creator, your will, not my will. Without you, I'm nothing. That kind of mentality. So your will, not mine. And that's really what this earth is needing right now. So this is really going right through to where we're coming through to the end, where we're around about here on the hero's journey now. So we've been all the way around there, and now we've hit around here somewhere. So we're getting close to the end now, stage 15 of 17. So just to quickly refresh, the prelude was the ordinary world where you start, you get caught in your journey. Usually it's a life-changing event, decision, something that happens to you, something that makes you say, it makes you realize that the way you've been living just doesn't work for you anymore. So the call to adventure, refusing the call, getting supernatural aid to help you get moving. You then cross the first threshold. So this is the one right back early on in the process where you cross the threshold and think that you're on a great path. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this. Like, who here can relate to the idea that when you started your own spiritual path or quest, it was in a way very exciting and for you, and then next minute you end up in the belly of a whale? Who can relate to that? That you started off thinking this is really great, and next minute you're like, what the heck just happened in my life? Like, suddenly you're getting challenges and things hit you which you didn't quite bargain on. Can anyone relate to that? Or was only one that happened to? Steve, definitely. Fiona, yep. Christine, Donna. Yep, so all of us hit that moment when you go, I didn't bargain on this. And then just as you get out of the belly of the whale, you got the road of trials waiting for you, the next wonderful gift, where you go through lovely tests and tribulations, things that hit you which you didn't expect. And then just when you think, and when you hear scriptures like this or messages about counting it joy when you fall into trials, and you just want to say, oh, fuck off, would you please just... I remember Steve was very much like that at one stage in his little hero's journey and telling us all where to go well and truly on many occasions. So, and then at that moment when you're just like, oh, this is just too much, you have that meeting with the goddess. And if you watch The Lord of the Rings, you would actually have seen this whole hero's journey being played out, where Frodo actually, you may remember, had his meeting with the goddess, that moment where he had that wonderful encounter with Kate Blanchett playing Galadriel, where you get that message or that gift, that quest to help for the thing. And then the next thing is a temptress. And of course, in Frodo's case, he met basically Smeagol, who turned up in his life and who tried to lure him to his destruction. Then there's that moment of the atonement with the Father, which we went through, which is that moment where you get right and you, after your encounter with the temptress, and get back to your path. Apotheosis, like a form of resurrection or transformation that happens. And then you receive the gift that you went on the journey for in the first place. But then once you've received the gift, the refusal, the return, which we shared about. Now that part for me, I can still remember that when I was on this journey, and especially after my experience 3 years ago at the Council of Nine, and I went through all my trials and tribulations and various things that were very similar to all of this, I can remember some time ago saying, I just don't want to go back. I actually had this really, what I call almost sarcastic, very, trying to think of the right word, very cynical attitude towards humanity. It's like, well, humanity aren't going to change. I mean, this is just a horrendous planet. And I still think that to a degree. But, what's the point of me being here anyway? I just want to get out of this stupid planet and go somewhere, leave them to their destruction. Hopefully the place will get blown up by a meteor. That was my attitude at one stage. And there's a time when you actually refuse the return in the journey. So whether it's on a spiritual path or in a business thing or stepping into something new, you actually receive the gift by which you went on your path to search for. And then the last thing you want to do is come back. A very good example of this was a Lion King movie, for those of you who want to see, where Simba was and his own hero's journey, was forced out into the wilderness to get away from Scar. And he meets his little friends, which he plays with. He grows into a powerful lion, has a mighty encounter with his father, who's deceased, but he doesn't want to go back. He's perfectly happy now living out in the wilderness, having fun, but he eventually realizes he's got a bigger purpose to play, and he goes back to face his nemesis, Scar. Has everyone here seen The Lion King out of interest? Hopefully most of you, yep. Okay. If not, I recommend you see it. It's worth, the original one is really worth seeing. It's a great depiction of the hero's journey. Fiona loves it. So yeah, me too, Fiona. So then you have the magic flight, and that's that kind of supernatural help to get away. And there's two reasons you get this. If the journey is something which you went on voluntarily, so to speak, or was commissioned by the gods, this is usually quite a smooth process where you get supernaturally propelled on your path to go back to humanity after the initial resistance. If you basically were kind of forced your way in there because you had to fight various forces and resist, which are against you, this will often be a very tumultuous time where you start the return home, and it's actually just as bad as the process previously, as you feel resistances from arch enemies turning up. And in fact, frequently then you need rescue from without. In other words, some kind of supernatural help to get you out of it. And Frodo, the example we gave was in The Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King, where Frodo, after basically going on his journey or whatever else, he destroyed the ring and he completed his path. He had to be carried by eagles, literally, to get away. You couldn't get a more clearer symbolic, because in the original hero's journey, the magic flight symbolized an eagle carrying you forward. So I think whoever did Lord of the Rings definitely knew about the whole hero's journey. So this is the one we did last time. So this is where forces from the ordinary world may come to collect them back or bring them home. So it says, when the hero refuses to return, or their magic flight ends in disaster. And Joseph Campbell said this: the world may have to come and get the hero, for the bliss of the deep abode is not lightly abandoned in favour of the self-scattering of the awakened state. And certainly when you hit this point where you really realise that you've awakened and you've let go of everything and you found what you were looking for, everything in you doesn't want to come back. It's the last thing that you want to do is come back and serve humanity. It said of Buddha that when Buddha started his path to enlightenment, as he started to clear his karma through meditation and through Kriya Yoga, he hit this point where he actually reached the gates of nirvana, and he saw the gates of samadhi, as they would call it. Those gates of heaven, where he realized that all he had to do was one more thing, and he could go straight through the gates, and he wouldn't be coming back to earth ever again. And many great saints and masters have been this path. In some of my own experiences, like when I was taken into heaven heavily back in 2018, and I met, for example, Ascended Master Paul from the scriptures. He actually ascended well beyond this earth and has been serving in other galaxies, whereas others have chosen to come back and serve. But Buddha, at that exact moment when he had the opportunity to leave, he took a final glance at earth, it said, and he felt compassion upon the misery and the suffering of humanity. And even in his stupidity, he had this deep desire to go back and serve, and he begged and asked if he could do so. Instead of Lahiri Mahasaya, he was a saint. When he completed his karma with Babaji, he made a decision to go and actually live in the city, to serve humanity in the city and help people in the business world and help the housewives and the mothers and everyone else who up until that time had been banned from joining the Kriya Yoga because they were considered to have too many material or personal cares to allow them to do it. So this is where many of the great heroes or great masters that you hear about all had their opportunity to ascend and to leave. It's even said in the Gnostic mystery teachings of the Pistis Sophia with Christ. You don't read about this in the Bible, but as the book of John says, the Bible only gives a skerrick of the teachings of Christ. And it's known in the mystery schools that after Christ ascended or resurrected, he spent 11 more years on earth teaching the disciples the deeper mysteries of the universe, and many books were written from that. So some other examples here was Han Solo needed to return to help Luke fight the fighters. The Return of the Jedi, Luke needs the help of the redeemed Darth Vader to destroy the Emperor. So in the Two Towers, Gandalf, who, for those of you who saw the Two Towers, he had a fight with a demon and ended up falling into a pit, but he defeated the demon and he then received a magic flight to help him come out. So you see the hero's journey there. And then Gandalf came back to help Aragorn and the hobbits in that particular forest when things were at a pretty difficult time. And without Gandalf, no doubt they never would have done it. So Moses in the burning bush, who he had a hero's journey mission to go and help the children of Israel be delivered from Egypt. And he had to flee into the wilderness. And he then had his experience at the burning bush, which then propelled him to go back. In Moses' case, he did not want to go back. He was forced back. So today now, let's discuss the return threshold, coming back. So what is this stage all about? This is a very important part of the hero's journey today. And it's funny, I was probably more excited about this one than almost any other part that I've done so far to date. I just, because this is probably that moment where you make that crossing, that step up, and you start to implement in the real world everything you've learnt in the journey. The number 15 is a very powerful number in numerology. 15 is actually the number of the temple ascent. In the Psalms, for example, there's 15 Psalms called the Songs of Ascent, from Psalms 120 to 134, but actually take you through a pilgrimage or journey esoterically, if you read them, into the throne room of God or into the higher place. So 15, and so revered was the Songs of Ascent that the ancient Hebrews, when they built their temple after the wisdom of Solomon, had 15 steps, and each step represented one of the evolutionary stages to enter the temple or throne room of God. And what they would do is that they would go onto the first step in one of their ancient feasts, and they would sing Psalm 120. Then they go to the second one and sing Psalm 121, and so on until they're done. When Queen Elizabeth was coronated, even back in the 1950s, there was Psalm 122 was actually read, which is the third Psalm of the Songs of Ascent, over Queen Elizabeth as she was entering in. So the power of these ancient scriptures and rituals and invocations is well known. I was sharing actually with someone just today, with Sammy actually, about how the Freemasons and many of the secret societies are very aware of this, and they highly revere the Bible and the scriptures, and how interesting it is that they're trying to make the ancient books like the Bible others hate speech. And it makes me smile, because I think, well, they did the same in the Dark Ages, and they managed to just keep the book in the hands of the priests. So this is a critical one, crossing the return threshold, coming back to mankind, or coming back to the world to serve. So this is where the hero has left the chaos of the new world, returns home, and re-enters the ordinary, mundane world they came from, the everyday life, the businesses, their family, their relatives. And often it's a bit of a shock for the hero, because the hero comes back as a different man or woman and thinks, yep, and you can't help but start to think, you've changed so much, you see the world so differently, you almost are sure that everyone else must see the world the same way you do it. And you start to find that they actually don't. And I'm sure many of you have excitedly tried to tell someone in your family, or even attempted to awaken someone who's a friend or family member, like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? I've got to show you what I found out about the vaccine, James, or I've got to show you what I found out about this. So I've got to reveal to you what I found out about that. And this person's like, what are you talking about? You know, like, or your family look at you like, what are you on? Like, no need to be so extreme about it. Gosh, just chill. And often it can be very demoralizing and even discouraged when you first do that or start to awaken on your journey and try and share it. And Frodo, you may remember in The Lord of the Rings, he tried to enjoy a normal beer and a normal life back at the Shire. But, and I quoted from someone on the website here, I liked this line, it's hard to go back to normal when you're living with Dark Lord PTSD. So, in other words, having gone through the kind of journey that Sauron's gone, or Frodo went on, it's very difficult to go back to normal life and be around normal people who are living a very normal world with the normal fears, living life in a normal way. I certainly found that experience after when I went through what I went through in 2018 with a fundamental change. And even back 20 years ago when I first awakened heavily, when I was part of an underground movement and went through some major spiritual experiences, it was very hard to relate to people around me, seeing the world, knowing what was coming, knowing what was going on. And of course, after 2018, I felt even more so that way. And 2019 was probably one of my most depressing kind of almost years I can think about in recent times for me, because I was seeing everything clearly. I was seeing what was coming. I could see the world that was going on, and yet I could not really adjust to the normal world. I'd go to family dinners and I just feel like I would feel completely like I didn't belong. I'd go and hang out with friends, I felt like I didn't belong. I'd sit there with people with clients and I felt like I didn't belong. I found for time, even business, I just had very little interest in business, in anything. Everything seemed unreal. I just wanted to get out of here and just leave and stay where I'd come from. Once you've experienced some of the realms of heaven, and Paul talks about this in Corinthians, he says, once you experience the third heaven and unspeakable things, he just really found it hard to function back in the normal life. And I certainly found that myself for a while. I felt completely out of sorts. I'd seen things. I'd seen the realities of future worlds, future dimensions. I'd seen the reality of things, and then I'd look at what was going on Earth and thought, why on earth am I even here? I mean, I don't serve any purpose here. I don't see any benefit I give to Earth whatsoever. I mean, this place is diabolical. And so crossing the return threshold is that moment where you actually get back and you re-enter the world and you readjust yourself back in, but you start to actually find your way to make it work. The next stage, which we're discussing next week or when I next speak, which is going to be stage 16, that's called the Master of Two Worlds. That's when you actually make the adjustment and you actually become the master of two worlds, where you learn to function as a master in the material, business or day-to-day world, as well as the spirit world. This stage is still in the transition. It's where you've come back to the ordinary world with your newfound gifts or powers, but is a kind of sense of how do I fit the new me into the current world I've come from. Can anyone relate to this? Like you've noticed you've gone through profound changes and now you're trying to make the new you fit into the world from which you've come from. Here, Linda. Yep. Famita, Donna, Steve. Yeah, exactly. You do. It's finding a way to make the new you fit into the world from which you've come from. Because keep in mind, as all of you would well have seen by now, people like familiarity. You know, that's why people go to McDonald's and eat the worst food on the planet, you know, because people like familiarity. They like something which gives them consistency. That's why people just watch the mainstream media and put up with incredible violations of their rights just to keep security and certainty of the world. It's why people stay in appalling relationships, because, you know, they're the devil, you know, than something new that you didn't expect. So people like certainty and they like security. So likewise, if people have known you a certain way, it can be very hard for people to adapt to you as being different to who you were. I know Grace used to tell me how my mum just was not coping for a long time with the new me, because she liked the me that she had before, the me who kind of fit into what was going on in the family, who didn't agree with it, but just in a way just put up with it. And the new me who just didn't anymore wasn't particularly popular. But bit by bit, this is about you learning to fit into the world and adjust yourself to the world, and people around you learning to connect and work with it. So this is a stage where you're adjusting back into the new world and bringing your new identity into the old world and finding a way to make it work. And of course, the thing that you start to realize, as no doubt all of you are now, is that you can't go back into the old world and be the person you once were, or even in a way fit into that world, because you can't. You have to transform that world completely, because otherwise either you don't fit or you will go back to the way as to who you were before. So when you're going back into the world that you came from, one of two things will happen. Either you'll lose everything that you gained on the journey, or most of it, and go back to the world you came. And as the scriptures say in 2 Peter, it says it's better for a dog to go back to its vomit than for someone who's encountered the glories of Christ and the higher universes to then basically turn their back on what they once knew. Or else you've got to change the world and become a light or a transformational energy to the people in the world around you. And that transformational energy can take various forms. And Grace and I were having a bit of a chuckle this morning about this, just how different we both are and how we're doing that. Like, as many of you know, I write these appalling Dr. Bill posts, and my newest hobby is I join pro-vax groups and mainstream media Facebook groups, and I go and troll them, and it's just brilliant. And I see myself as a wonderful balancing energy to them. And I go and write these dreadful posts, so they have no idea how to handle me. And it's quite fun. And as I'm doing it, I can actually feel the energies collapsing in the group. And many times I've stopped people getting worked up, and, you know, to my surprise more than anything else, but I've been finding that people have been saying to me that way you go about it has helped me find courage and confidence to not take it so seriously and take on my family and people around me. And the reason I do it that way is I know that in the spirit realm, that this new agenda that we're seeing right now is a powerful, dangerous agenda. And it sounds like a statement the obvious, but you're dealing with a force and a power that I personally don't sense, or what I was shown is like nothing that we've experienced as a race, if not ever, certainly for a very, very long time. We're dealing with dark spiritual forces that are making what I see as a final kind of thrust to really get the planet back to full control and prevent any kind of awakening from happening on the planet, and going to whatever extremes are necessary, from bringing in what I personally believe experimental therapies as one example, to actually, as Rudolf Steiner put, detach the soul from the etheric body, from the body, to actually break people's connection to their spiritual being and get people dependent on a beast or artificial intelligence. Now, that's a fairly serious thing, and you're dealing with powerful forces. And this is for some of our deeper mystery teachings, but you're dealing with what I call the spirit of the mother and the daughter, or the forces of Belial, which are very, very powerful forces written about in many of the ancient scrolls. And I know that normal kind of warfare doesn't work with these ones. Whereas when I go and mock and taunt and take the piss out of them, they have no idea what to do with me. And it very quickly can collapse the energies and deal with it. That's been my way of dealing with this. And then others have got their own different path of dealing with it. So I do that deliberately in a way, so to speak, because what I've done is I've realized that that's just who I am. I'm a born shit stirrer, for those of you who know me. And rather than trying to change myself to fit in with the world that I'm living in, I've taken the new me and integrated it with the me that I've always known and brought it into the whole new identity. So partly when you go on a spiritual path or on a major quest and you find something new and powerful, there can tend to be a tendency of disowning the old you or disowning everything else about you. Whereas the 15th stage is where you come back into the ordinary mundane world. That's not only the people around you, but it's the old version of you that you once knew that in a way you disowned as part of your hero's journey, but you realize that that part of you is still real. It could be as simple as, for example, Steve is a good example, because Steve is I always knew Steve as a brilliant copywriter in business. That's how I met Steve. And I even did his courses and learned from him. And then Steve, of course, went on his own hero's journey and has been through a very strong awakening and change and discovering new parts of his identity. And then, of course, no doubt at some stage in that journey, Steve would have been almost saying, does this old copywriter Steve even fit into my new identity? And it almost becomes a disassociation or disowning of that old identity, which makes it very hard to almost function in that role anymore. So no doubt, Steve, when you were working with clients doing that over the last couple of years, at times you would have felt like a fraud or like, why am I even doing this? I don't want to help these people. But then part of his crossing the return is actually integrating back that old you or that former you and realizing that's still actually me, even that old timeline version of me, and finding a way to integrate and work that in with your new way of being to bring it in a whole new way of being. And actually become a servant with that, but now from a whole new perspective. I can remember totally disassociating or disowning my taxation identity, my lawyer, tax, wealth creation guy for quite a while, thinking that guy was that old me, that, you know, what I call carnal me. But I've actually realized that that part of me is also part of my spiritual identity. That part of me, because right now with the Global Wealth Club that Grace and I are building, that's actually serving the world in providing a real solution to get through a coming financial crash that's happening, which although on the one hand, you could say that money doesn't matter if you're on a spiritual path, it does still matter while we're living in a material world. And it's an important thing. It can be a major hindrance if we don't have that side worked out. So I've actually realized that that identity means it's very important. But now I'm coming from a new perspective. Whereas before it was a form of income, it was just it was a job, it was something that I enjoyed. Now it's more become a mission. It's when I sit down and do wealth planning with a client, it's a mission now. I'm actually see everyone that I help and make a difference for. I know I can choose to participate in that person's goodness. So as that person then uses their wealth for good and they're protected and saved, they can then use it for good. But I know because I was involved in helping that, I participate in that and I'm part of that. So this crossing the return threshold is learning to integrate and bring everything back together. So this is a time to bring the pieces back together for many of you who've gone on this hero's journey the last 2 or 3 years. You've had your worlds turned upside down with what's been going on the planet, as well as events in your life. And now saying, now's the time to bring all the pieces back together. That me, which I disowned, that group of people even I disowned, my family, and find a way to work with them. I noticed even yesterday, a couple of days ago, I spoke to one of my cousins who I was very good friends growing up with. And then in all this change in me, we've just lost complete connection over the last number of years. And yet I spoke to him the other day and it was like normal. I actually was glad to speak to him. I enjoyed speaking to this guy. And I actually said to him, we should catch up for lunch. He goes, yeah, that'd be great. But I know that if I saw him, yeah, it'd be in a way, I'd just be the guy that always knew him, but I would be coming from a whole new perspective. So the first threshold was a symbolic death from the home life. So the first time that you cross the threshold, it's like you walking away from the old you completely and renouncing that old you and saying that is no longer me. But the final transition is where you actually come back into the real world that you thought you'd forsaken, but this time as a master. Christ, when he was on earth, Yeshua, he renounced and for many years disappeared completely into Egypt. And even when he was back in Israel, he went into the wilderness and was tempted by Satan for 40 days and nights and didn't eat. And then he came back into the world and he got straight back into the world from which he came from. He lived in society. He ate food with people. If you read the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he hung out with people. He actually went down to the pub and sat down and talked with publicans, it says. He even went to the brothels and hung out with the prostitutes and talked to them, and you can read that. It's in the Bible. He turned water into wine for a party. He went to the banks and he beat up some of the bankers, turned their tables over and went off his face at them. He went into the church and deliberately upset people. That's why I like Jesus. I can relate to him. He's a shit stirrer, like I was. He deliberately would go to church and heal people on the Sabbath day because he knew it was illegal to heal people on the Sabbath day, so he went and did it anyway. At one stage, he and his disciples, on the Sabbath day, when you weren't allowed to eat crops from the field, he just went and picked some crops and ate it. So Christ came into the world and lived as the new man that he now was, who'd gone in, been tempted by Satan, spent years in mystery schools preparing for his mission on earth, and then he went into the real world and he became a missionary for his people. For 3.5 years, he traveled around the earth, or around Israel. He healed many. He preached and taught the great messages that we read today, and was also an absolute shit stirrer of the highest order. And he did many, many miracles and regularly insulted his disciples when he thought they were stupid. And so the point is, we forget about that side of Christ. We often almost turn Christ into this mythical, mystical, weirdo figure, but yet the scriptures say he's the Son of Man. Why was he called the Son of Man? Because Christ came as the Son of God, or the Most High God, the ultimate, what the Hindus would call the full embodiment of Brahma, which is the ineffable energy or source of God, the invisible creator, the energy that creates everything on earth that we see, of which we're all part of one big energy, but came in a human form and human body to earth. It's an extraordinary concept and almost impossible to wrap your head around. That's who Yeshua was, and that's how he came. But what's amazing is the example which he left us was he came and lived a normal life in the normal world. So he didn't just come and do weird stuff and walk around as some esoteric guy floating in the air, speaking weird messages to people, like sometimes we'd like to think. He actually turned up, hung out at pubs, hung out at brothels, and that's why it said he completely fucked with the head of the Pharisees and religious people of his day. They were like, how could this guy possibly even remotely be the Messiah? I mean, there's just no way he could be the Son of God. I mean, the Son of God wouldn't come and live and get born in a stable, basically in some poor places. He would have turned up and been in a rich palace, because that's how they thought, with their ego, their pride, their focus on earthly things. But he said, like, this guy would turn up in a warrior's outfit. He'd be rich as heck. He would be like, I mean, why would you do that? I mean, why would you turn up, born in some silly little stable, and then grow up as a carpenter, which is like a really normal job, and then live normal lives? And then why would you hang out at brothels and at the pub? Because that's what he did. If you don't believe me, you just have to read the scriptures for yourself. Christ, it actually says he hung out with prostitutes, he hung out with the brothel, he hung out at the pub, he went to parties and weddings with normal people, and because he knew it would reach them, he turned water into wine. He did stuff on their level to help them see the power and glory of God by doing things on their level. He got royally pissed at the religious people who were profiteering in the temple and using it as a money-making operation, where they were actually, what they were doing was doing money-changing rorts to basically rip people off. And he went in there, turned over the tables, got his whip, and he belted the crap out of them. So Christ was a pretty cool guy, and he was a shit stirrer. And even to the point was when he was killed, he was told by the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, the most powerful man in that world at the time, who actually says to him, do you realize who I am? He goes, I'm like the most powerful guy. I have the power over your life to choose life and death for you. And it says, Jesus looked him calmly in the eyes and says to him, basically words to this effect, my friend, he says, you have no power over me other than what I've given to you and what's been given to you from above. He said, do what you will with me. But he said, those who delivered you to me, their sin is greater than yours. In other words, he was saying to Pilate, these guys have the greatest sin, but you've still got sin for what you're doing right now. And it actually says Pilate shut himself. If you read the books, he crapped his pants. That's why he tried to get him released straight away. The scriptures also tell you in Luke that Pontius Pilate's wife had a dream about Christ and was begging him, you must let this man go. This man is the Son of God. He's holy. You cannot be responsible for his death. And if you read the works of Josephus and other books, Pilate eventually gave in to the masses, and within a matter of days started to go mentally insane, ended up in a mental asylum and was kicked out. He went insane for basically the choice that he made. So this is one powerful guy, Yeshua, very powerful man of God, a great, great one. And yet this is where we go so wrong as a society today, and we haven't learnt jack shit as humanity. Everyone was waiting for some guy to turn up who was some mystical, magical guru who moved in great power and authority and was super rich. That is why I have no doubt that when the false Messiah or the false Christ or the Antichrist world leader comes in these days, but prophesied in the book of Revelation, most of the world will receive him and rejoice because he will make sense to most of the world. Some guy who says all the right things, who's probably a plant, vegan eater, who probably speaks beautiful things about climate change. He talks about the beautiful, pure teachings of Jesus, of peace, does holographic miracles in the sky and tells people everything they want to see, comes in a good background, in wealth or whatever else, that's the kind of person that the world will go, yeah, this is the kind of leader we were looking for. Whereas the Christ who came was nothing like that whatsoever. He was a very ordinary guy who lived an ordinary life, but didn't need to prove anything. I don't know if any of you have met some billionaires. I mean, I've met some very, very rich people who are the most normal people you'll ever meet in your life. They're dressed in like country clothing. They're very kind of chilled. You'd never guess in a million years, but these guys are super wealthy. So this is where the crossing of the threshold, in a way, when you're on a spiritual journey, if you can't help as you get great powers and great authority come into your life, a big part of you just wants to separate and, just simply go into your own little cave or your own little path and, things like that. Now just give me 10 seconds. I've just got to grab something. So basically, yeah, what happens is people go on this path and it's where you hit this point where it's like, you know what, I may be on a spiritual journey or on a hero's journey, but I've also got an ordinary life to live. And in many ways, after you come back from the journey, you fit in better to the world, or you enjoy the world better than you ever did before. For a mission field. So Christ knew that that's what he was.
Hey everyone, just hold on a sec. Warren just lost his connection. No, it wasn't you at all, Fiona. I could hear him talking. He's in the other room from me, and but he wasn't coming through my laptop. Well, Mika, there has been a few gremlins. The astral plane has been busy. It's actually beautiful, sunny, Fiona, but it was freezing this morning. Warren goes swimming very early in the morning every day. And it was as cold today as it was the last week. Actually, today was the coldest day.
I'm back now.
Ah, you're back.
Yeah, just completely lost. What did I last say, Grace? Where did it cut off? What was I saying?
Steve is pretty good at where you were last at. Do you recall it, Steve?
Yeah, what was that? What was I saying?
That was 5 minutes ago. I don't know. It was, you were saying about the false Messiah coming. You know, who says all the right things, does all the right things. People accept him, but they're a false Messiah.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, thanks.
I thought you were going to talk about
like
Joe Biden then, but anyway, let's move on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so what I was saying was that so many would accept a false Messiah because a false Messiah was a Christ or a false version of Christ that, you know, but fit in with everybody in terms of what they were seeing. So most people, in a way, want to think of a great master as someone like yourself. So the false Messiah, somebody turning up and saying all the right things from I love animals, I like vegans, I'm a plant medicine man, whatever else they say, and then having lots of wealth, and I show it through this, is going to be very easy to accept it. Whereas Christ was anything other than that. He turned up and was a very down-to-earth kind of a guy. Many billionaires, like cryptocurrency billionaires or millionaires I've met, are the most down-to-earth people. So part of actually coming into this, reintegrating into the world, is where you come back to the world, into the normal world, but you almost start to enjoy it. I've actually noticed since I've been going through this phase myself, for the first time in my life, I'm actually enjoying being on Earth right now. And that's a big thing for me to say, but it's the first time I've actually really enjoying being here, because I see it as a temporary assignment. I've been shown very clearly, like Christ knew his path when he came. He was shown in meticulous detail by the Father. He knew when he came back into the normal world, he was only there for a time to do his mission. And he knew that once the cross came, he'd finished his path. He'd finished his mission on earth. And I can remember 2 years ago when I was shown my path very clearly. At first, it was difficult to accept. But now that I've accepted it, I'm enjoying Earth immensely because I know what my mission is here. You start to realize that you're a pilgrim on Earth. You're here on a temporary assignment as an indigo. You're just here to do a mission and do a very specific or precise path. And when you finish that mission, you can go back or go and do whatever it is you wish to do. Once Buddha finished his mission, he had the choice to come back, and he chose to come back and continue to serve humanity as an enlightened master. Christ made the same choice. He chose to come and serve. Lahiri Mahasaya made that choice to come and serve. So the crossing the return threshold is that integration back into the ordinary world. And this can be, like I said, either a very easy process or a highly challenging process for you. And so the example of the Lord of the Rings was when the hobbits came back in the actual books, and I don't think this was on the movie, but when Frodo had completed his mission, he got the ring back. When he arrived back, he found that Saruman and his band of ruffians had taken over the Shire and were running it brutally. So he and the hobbits and Gandalf had to get rid of Saruman again. Now, in Star Wars, Luke had already fought Darth Vader and he had to basically fight him again and fight him one last time before basically Darth Vader helped him defeat the Emperor. The Israelites, when they defeated Pharaoh with Moses, they then had to cross the Jordan into the Promised Land to face some more giants all over again. So Joseph Campbell says in his book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, that the returning hero, to complete his adventure, must survive the impact of the world. So the trick in returning is to retain the wisdom gained on the quest and yet integrate that wisdom into normal everyday life. And that's such an important, important passage. And I'm actually going to underline it. you know, make it really obvious for you because it's just such a clear one. So retain the wisdom gained on the quest and integrate that wisdom back into normal everyday life. And I've been finding that the more I've been able to do that, I'm actually really enjoying life. I'm actually enjoying running businesses and being involved in that and seeing the money come in, not because I have no attachment to it now. My interest is in completing my legacy and getting that done as fast as I possibly can and having the funds to do that legacy. And then once that's done, I've completed my path and finished my mission on earth, so I can then choose what I do next. So the beauty of retaining it and bringing it back into normal everyday life is we are fundamentally on the planet to serve. And that's why Christ said, the greatest, those of you who wish to be the greatest must become the servant of all. So he said, unlike the Pharisees or religious leaders of his day or churches or politicians, he said, these people are just doing what they want to do because it serves them well. And if they're doing their stuff because they get recognition for it, they've already got their reward upon earth. But he said, but for you, the people of God, or those of you who are here as an Indigo or Hebrew, you're here first and foremost to serve in some capacity on this earth and actually help planet Earth in its process of ascension and what it's going through right now. So this is a trick. Can anyone relate to this right now? Okay, so we've got, Linda and Miko, Famita, I'm sure there's others as well. So this is a time, as you're going through your journey, to actually think, how can I integrate this into normal life? I actually was speaking today was about King Solomon and about Ecclesiastes. And the last book that King Solomon ever wrote, who was a son of David and who was considered the wisest king to ever live on earth. Something that King Solomon, he wrote the final book he wrote after his returning. Solomon went on his own hero's journey, and at one stage he actually went right away from the path. But eventually he came back, and the Book of Song of Songs is a whole account from Solomon where he's sharing about his reunion with Christ, with the bride, or the bride of Christ, reunion back with the one. And Ecclesiastes is his finishing book. And one of the great things about that book is Solomon starts off in Ecclesiastes 2, and he tells this whole story in Ecclesiastes 1 about how there's nothing new under the sun. Everything you're seeing today has already happened before. He says that the more knowledge you have, the more sorrow that you have. That's another lesson that he gave. Something that Solomon says was he spent his whole life seeking to get lots of wealth, lots of abundance. He looked to enjoy life. He had as many women as he could. He had 300 wives, 700 concubines. How on earth he managed that, goodness knows, but he did. He had a palace. He had all kinds of things. But he said at the end of the day, he realized it was all vanity. And his words of conclusion was, he said, fear God. He said, enjoy your life, enjoy your labor, enjoy your purpose, serve as well as you can, but have a heck of a lot of fun while you're going about it. And one of his lessons, which I still to this day use heavily in business, in Ecclesiastes 9, when he says, everyone has their time and chance, he says, that it's nothing about your talent, it's nothing about your skill, it's nothing about how smart you are, how beautiful you are, how sexy you are, how fat, how skinny, whatever you are. But he says time and chance and opportunity happens to everyone. It's all it's about. And it's one of the reasons why, for example, I taught, Grace and I taught the boys, just life is just an experience. It doesn't really matter. If you get really bad marks in school, who cares? I don't think anyone in this webinar right now can even remember much about their school marks or what they learnt in school. So much of what we get stressed out about in life and get worked up about, we look back with the wisdom of hindsight and laugh and go, I can't believe I was so worked up about that time of my life. So the hero's journey is actually starting to integrate the spiritual man or woman with the practical. Many heroes or spiritual heroes fail in this part. I will add, they fail dismally in this part. Many people who go on a strong spiritual journey they find it very hard to ever integrate back in. Even great heroes that you hear about in the script, like Babaji at one stage had difficulties. Sri Yuketswa, many of them, they had great difficulty at one stage integrating back into normal life because it becomes such a profound experience for you once you've experienced the glories of divine heaven. So Joseph Campbell says this: many failure to test the difficulties of his life are found at his threshold. So the first problem of the returning hero is to accept as real, after experience the soul-satisfying vision of fulfillment, the passing joys and sorrows, banalities and noisy obscenities and stupidities and absurdities of life. Why would we even re-enter such a world? Why would we even attempt to make plausible or even interesting to silly men and women consumed with passion the experience of transcendental bliss? In other words, what's the point of coming and giving enlightenment to people? What's the purpose of even serving silly humans who are so caught up? And, you know, and some of you have seen my Dr. Bill post, you know, even the other day, I was on a mainstream media post and people all getting worked up and people should get this. And there was a big argument. And I just came on and said, look, I'm devastated that people are still getting, you know, COVID after getting vaccinated. And I said, all I know is just want to get jabbed and get down the brothel and do it safely as fast as I can. And that, of course, got a lot of likes. And that was my way of just taking the piss out of people consumed with silliness. And after lockdowns, the first thing they're excited about is going to the pub wearing their masks, you know. And there's such a temptation, I know for me, and certainly, and I'm sure for others, but like, why would you even bother bringing the message of Christ to these absolute idiots, to these morons? I mean, these people deserve to lose their rights and freedoms. They deserve to be microchipped, you know, have jabs up their ass and be COVID tested every day for the rest of their life. And yet in all that, Christ came and Buddha, they looked with compassion and thought these people really are idiots. But you know what? That's why I've been sent here, to do my part. And there can equally be a temptation to go the opposite extreme and become completely altruistic, and you run around trying to rescue idiots from their own idiocy. Whereas what Christ did in the end was as he says very clearly in the scriptures, he said, for those who have an ear to hear, let them hear. In other words, I'm here for the sheep of Israel. I'm here for the lost sheep of Israel. I'm here for the missing indigos, the ones who got lost and got fallen into this realm. I'm here to bring them back. It's like Psalm 119, it says, I have strayed like a lost sheep. Seek your servant, for I've not forgotten your commands. In other words, Christ said, I came to bring back the lost sheep of Israel, the indigos, those who knew Christ in their heart at some stage in their evolution, those who are the children of God. And Christ says in John 10, he said, my sheep hear my voice. In other words, those who are of my lambs, or those who are the servants of the Most High God, they hear the voice of their shepherd and rejoice. They hear the voice of truth and they rejoice in their hearts. Many even now, what's happening, I'm noticing, are starting to listen. People are starting to pick up the Bibles, the foundation of Australia. That was the foundation of the Magna Carta in England, was the Holy Scriptures, and starting to go back to the Scriptures that once upon a time they probably laughed at or wondered what was even about. And they're the people who Christ said I came for. And they're the people who we're here for. We're here for the people who are seeing what's going on. They're frightened. They know what's happening. They don't quite know what to make of it. But deep down within them is a lost sheep of Israel hidden in there somewhere. There's someone who, when they hear the voice of truth, something in them says, I'm here, I listen, I follow, just show me how to follow. And that's why Christ was so kind. You can see he was very rude to his disciples who should have known better, but he was very kind to the people in the pub. He was very kind to the strippers and prostitutes. He was very kind to the frightened mother who didn't know what to do with her children. He was very frightened. He's very kind to the frightened man who didn't know how he'd provide for his family, but wanted to. These people, when you read scripture, Christ was very kind. He was kind to the leper who was broken in his sickness and in his body, in his eczema ripping his body, who cried out and said, heal me, O Lord. And he says, you know, it is my will, be healed. That's why Isaiah 35 says that when there's true compassion and there's true love, and you have integrated that part of being willing to serve in the material world and not doing it through an altruistic, self-serving motive, where you're just kind of wanting to be a rescuer, or basically not just being here and putting up with it for the sake of it, but when it says, Isaiah 35 says, when there's true compassion, and he actually says that when you say to the fearful hearted and those who are really scared shitless of what's going on, you can see it for yourself in Isaiah 35, he says, when you say to them, do not fear, behold, your God will come with a vengeance to save you. When you strengthen the hands of the weak hands, when you strengthen the feeble knees, when you help those who are really finding this hard, it says, then the eyes of the blind will be opened, and then the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. That's when you'll see miracles and an awakening hit this earth, which you could not have even imagined, a turnaround in what's going on. You would not have thought was in any way possible in your wildest dreams at any stage of your evolution. And in fact, this is where you can see it for yourself here. In Isaiah 35, talking about the days that we're entering into, what's called, some would call the millennial. It says, strengthen the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. Say to those of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with a vengeance. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart, which is basically a deer, and the tongue of the dumb shall sing. For in the wilderness waters shall break out, and streams in the desert. And in verse 8, it says, and a highway shall be there. It shall be called the highway of holiness. And when you look at this in the mystery teaching, this is saying a great portal, a fifth dimensional portal will be opened that will be there for all to enter and all to see, that will take you straight into those higher dimensions anytime. And it says, no unclean shall pass over there. In other words, if you have not purified your karma, if you have not made that hero's journey, if you've not stepped back into service, you've not finished your mission, you shall not pass over it. But it shall be for those, and it says, even the fools, because wayfaring means people who continually go astray because they're dummies. It says they will not go astray in this highway. And that's why we built City Awakening, by the way, to build these higher grille cities. That's why Grace and I started this, was to build a highway of holiness, a highway. But even the foolish upon earth, those who up until now have been numbnuts, it says will find their way through this. And that's why Christ said that Christ came, or Yeshua came. He came to help the people. It says he came to bring recovery of sight for the blind, people who really can't see but want to. He came to open the ears of those who are deaf and seemingly stupid, but really don't want to be stupid anymore. It says for those who are poor and broken, but who really don't want to be poor and broken anymore, but just don't know how to get themselves out of it. He says he came to reach these people. He came to reach the poor. It says he came in Matthew 5 to reach the hurting. He came to reach the bruised. He came to reach the sick. That's what he says. He says that he came specifically to help these people come and make this through and get through these times that were ahead. And you can see this here in Matthew 5. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you. In other words, take the shit out of you for your path, and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven. And then you can see further on, he says in verse 14, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Verse 16, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. That is exactly what the hero's journey is ultimately about. And when you come back, you're the light of the world, and you're not a light of the world if you're sitting there hidden away in the wilderness, enjoying the bliss of heaven, but judging the world and basically in your heart despising the world and thinking they just deserve what they're getting. It's the light of the world says, yes, you know they deserve fully well what they're getting, and you know that, and you laugh at them, but then there's that part of you that says, I know in the midst of that, there's some gold, there's some pure, there's the sons and daughters of God who are in there, lost somewhere, frightened, trapped in this world, trapped in the tricks and devices of Satan, caught up in the cords of Belial, caught up in the witchcraft of Jezebel, who just say, like, we want out, but we don't know how to get out. And they're the ones that we're here for. That's the ones who you're here for, and they're the ones who we've been sent for to help these people. And notice what Christ said here, you are the light of the world. In other words, you. Didn't say he was, he said you. And he says here in Luke 4, it says, he quoted Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 18 when he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them the bruised, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." So notice what he says. He's here to preach the gospel to the poor. And doesn't necessarily mean poor financially, but the poor in spirit. That's what he said in Matthew 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit, who've surrendered their ego, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In other words, those who died to this world, who've died to all the attachments of this world. Yes, they enjoy this thing, they enjoy this planet, but they have died to that. They're poor in spirit. In other words, I'm absolutely just here to do my path, to do my work, to heal the brokenhearted. For those of you in your family whose hearts are broken, who's smashed, who've been really wounded by life, what's going on around them, who don't want to be wounded, who desire to be healed, but have no idea how to get through. It's just an amazing message when you read this, and it's life transforming. And it makes the whole hero's journey worthwhile when you see this. And so then going on this quote, it says, "As dreams that were momentous by night may seem silly in the light of day, so the prophet and poet can discover themselves playing the idiot before a jury of sober eyes. The serious, easy thing is to commit the whole community to the devil." Don't we all relate to that, hey? "To commit the whole community to the devil and retire into the heavenly rock dwelling, close the door and make it fast." Oh yeah, I'm sure Grace and quite a few of you would go, "Oh yeah, that's what I've been wanting to do. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I was doing at one stage." But the final line, "The work of representing eternity in time and perceiving in time eternity cannot be avoided." In other words, all that are part of the bride of Christ, or the sons and daughters of God that are part of God's children, he wants everyone home. You can see that when you see that the parable of the lost sheep, where he says, if he has 100 sheep and 99 of them back in the pen, but there's one sheep missing, he said he will go and hunt that one sheep down. And I'm sure if you were that one sheep that was lost right now, you'd be damn glad that he was willing to do that. The scroll of Amos says very clearly that not one of the children of God, the seed, will be lost. All of them will be brought home. So that's what we're here to do, to bring them home, to bring back the lost sheep of Israel home. This is another great book on what I'm illustrating the point, where Hannah Hurnard shares the allegorical story of a girl called Much Afraid, who went through a journey where she was a cripple, where she was lame, and she was, a doormat to her family and mistreated and tried to be forced to be married to someone she didn't want to. And she followed the shepherd and went through a journey of high places and various challenges and hardships, and then reached a point where she had to sacrifice her whole life and everything into the hands of the beloved. And then she received the very gift she was seeking, and she was changed to grace and glory and given incredible beauty. But then the very relatives that had abused her and mistreated her, after spending a long time in the mountain with the shepherd, she had this compassion and said, "I want to go home and help my relatives and my family. Can I go?" And the shepherd said, "Yes, that is where you must go now." And then the journey shows how she went home to bring the message to her family and bring the message to those around her who she loved. Because now, for the first time in her life, she had pure, unconditional love. And she saw the lessons in her family and what they'd been there to teach her. It said of Joseph, the great man in the Bible, who he was promised that he would be a ruler over Israel and he would be a truly great man. His brothers, it says, took him. They threw him into a pit. He was locked and imprisoned for 13 years for something that he did not even do. He went through unimaginable hardships in the prison. He spent 13 years like that. But it says that with Joseph, that the prophecy that he would become the world's most powerful man that was given to him when he was a boy. At age 30, through a series of supernatural events, he became the prime minister of Egypt. He became the second most powerful man in the world under Pharaoh. And he saved Israel, and he saved the Hebrews from a famine because he got all of them to come into Egypt. But what was interesting was the 12 brothers who put him into the prison, who'd got him sold into slavery, who turned on him. And when he'd been crying for their mercy, they badly abused him. And when you read many of the scrolls, what they say was Joseph was so bitter at his brothers, as you can imagine. He was like, I just want these guys punished. I want them judged. He would have had many, many thoughts of just wanting to absolutely, seeing his brothers, get their just result. He probably had dreams about their revenge. But many years later, as the Prime Minister of Egypt, where he was in charge of all of the food, all of the wealth of the world, his brothers turned up in abject poverty and scared because they couldn't eat. And after testing them a little bit, he announced himself to them. They hugged them and cried, and they felt and when they tried to apologize, he said, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." I mean, when you think about it, that's an extraordinary shift in consciousness. He said, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. In other words, this was my path, and you were part of my path for me to become who I am today on my hero's journey and be a man that's now responsible for saving the lives of many all over the world. So the hero's journey requires so many shifts and transformations and coming back into the ordinary world. And often people who've treated you very badly in times past become now the very people that you will find you'll be led to serve in your path and help these people through their journey. Song of Solomon depicts the hero's journey beautifully. In chapter 1, the Shulamite, the type of the wounded bride of Christ, and this would be a great journey to do one time in meditation or in one of Grace in one of your groups. But the Shulamite begins her journey to seek her beloved. And it starts off by saying earlier in that book, it says, I am black but comely. I have been wounded by my brothers. They have struck me. In other words, when you read it, she was a girl who'd been badly treated by her brothers, her family, had been abused in almost every way imaginable. But she just said, I'm just basically, and she kind of felt ashamed, like, who am I to even come on this journey? But, accept me for who I am in my brokenness. And the beloved, the beloved or the Christ, led her on her journey. And in chapters 2 to 5, you will see the stages of her journeys, her various trials, her fears, where she was attacked by armies, where she needed to defend herself in warfare from constant dangers, where she went through various little layers of springtime and then darkness and things like that, where she was betrayed, where she was mistreated by the authorities of her city. Even the religious prophets and leaders that she trusted, they turned on her and they struck her and they judged her badly and wounded her. And you can read all of that there. And it's a whole mixture of duality experiences ranging from great joy to great sorrow to great fear. But chapter 6, something happens to her. She starts to she goes on her journey and crosses a threshold and doesn't even know she's doing it. She's so fixated on finding her beloved and connecting with him, she loses consciousness of everything else around her. And when you read chapter 6, before she's known it, she's actually crossed the threshold. And suddenly she's a different woman into stage 16. And we'll talk more about this one next week. Because Song of Solomon is very important in the stage 16, where you move into the master of two worlds. And the book finishes with her being the master of two worlds and being the teacher of many of the daughters of Jerusalem and her own family and those who had misunderstood her. Now she's become the teacher of these people. I can relate to her a lot because I was in my upbringing, I was bullied a lot in school. I tended to be the one left out in many parts of my life as a teenager. In my family, I definitely was the one who didn't always get favored with the others. I was a bit of a kind of laughing stock in many of the ways of people. And in my family even, they didn't really understand me apart from a couple of people. And of course, on my own journey to the promised land, I felt like I never fitted, went through many of these stages. But I can remember having a dream where in the dream, I went through various things and then I saw myself, this is many years ago, teaching many. And people were in awe of the wisdom and the power which I'd been gifted with. And at the time, it seemed almost impossible, but I actually saw it in a clear vision. And now as I'm having all this happen, I'm like, wow, I cannot believe what I'm seeing now, how I'm speaking to bigger and bigger groups and all that. This is the stuff I was shown over 20 years ago in this vision. I was actually shown this in this dream, rather. I was very clearly revealed that. And I saw myself, like I said, just literally speaking to many. And helping many, and including many from my past who'd been in my school, who'd been part of that group who'd mocked me or kind of made fun of me. And even now, many of my old school friends are coming back into my life in this Awake group and others. And they're now looking to me for leadership. And I shake my head because in school, I was a nobody. And I don't think any of these people took me seriously at all. So before she knew it, she took that crossing the threshold into stage 16. And in the Narnia, in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, they go through a series of 7 challenges to try and find the lost lords of Narnia. And probably, Grace knows this especially, the ending of this book, probably one of my favorite just about of any books, and where I always have tears when I read it, where it talks about what happened in the end of the book, which has been really my lifelong mission since a boy, where it says they enter the last sea into Aslan's country, and Aslan the lion, who's basically the type of Christ. And as they entered the sea of Aslan's country, as they went through it, the light got brighter and the glory of God just increased. And it said all of their faces got younger and younger. And in fact, one of them actually, as they got deeper into Aslan's country, they reached this point where there was no return. They either had to go back or they would cross beyond and never come home. And one of them chose Repacheep to actually cross over. And he, in other words, like Enoch, just walked straight through and never came back. He just descended. Whereas the other one, the King Caspian, who wanted to do the same, he like Buddha, he hit that point and he knew he had to go back and serve his people a little bit more. So he made that choice with great grief in his heart, even though everything in him wanted to cross the gate. So this is the part where you enter that like last sea, that part where you start to experience the light of Christ. And often we think when we stay in that heavenly bliss, in that part when we've experienced our gift or hero's journey as I did, you've experienced ultimate bliss. What I've been discovering as I've come back and served in the ordinary world, which I was clearly told to do at the beginning of this year, and everything in me didn't want to do it, and focus on the business and really grow it, I've been seeing more of the glory of God and more light. I don't even tell people what I've been seeing and experiencing in recent days, but I've just been seeing things, and I've been seeing like the glory and the light of Christ, like it's on me, unspeakable. And the more I've been getting back into the two worlds together, the material world, the day-to-day ordinary world, I've been seeing that, and I've been feeling like this book where it says as they were on the last sea and they were coming more to Aslan's country. So I'm starting to see those lights. I'm starting to see those gates of Samedi, like not before me. And like, wow, the more you serve, the more the glory of God starts to fill you. And this is what Aslan says here. It says, this is the very reason why you brought to Narnia, but by knowing me here for a little, you may know me better there. So it's interesting. In other words, was taken into the realms of Narnia, of bliss, to go back into earth and know him even more. Ezekiel 47, it talks about this. It says, there's 4 stages of evolution that we talk about here. And I'm just going to go into the scriptures and read this one actually. Ezekiel 47. So this is the scripture talking about the temple of God, what the temple of the millennium or the temple of the higher heavens, that for the people of God, that's actually within our own soul, our own consciousness. So in verses 3 to 6 or 5, what we see a river in a great glorious temple is what we see. So there's actually a temple of God where there's a river of life which goes out from the temple, is what it says in Ezekiel 47. And it talks about a man, as they cross the threshold, there was 4 levels of measuring the river. There was 1,000 cubits, and then he got up to his ankles in the water. Then the next 1,000 cubits, which is like 1,500 feet, went to the knees, then to the waist. But then the ultimate is where you enter a river to swim in which you cannot be passed over. And this is the ultimate crossing of the threshold. In other words, you've gone so deep into the river of God that you no longer control it anymore. You can't even walk in it. See, when you're up to the water in your waist, you still have power. You can use your feet to lock into the soil. You can stay there. If you're in your ankles, it's easy. You can run at any time. If you're up to your knees, again, it can be a strong pull, but you can still run away pretty easily. If it's up to your waist or your loins, it can be harder because, you know, there's a current, but still you've got some control to resist. But once you enter the river where you cannot in any way pass over anymore, where you've lost your connection with and you're swimming, then this is that moment where you're just in the tide, in the flow of God, and the rivers may take you to where you have no idea where you're going to go, but all you know. And that's what I call the ultimate surrender. That is when you've just surrendered your life, when you've just said, you know what? If it's your will, God, for me just is to go back into normal Monday life and just be a magnificent, you know, mum, or be a magnificent healer running a simple, you know, work and healing people, or if I'm being a wonderful father, or if I'm being an amazing businessman, I'm going to do that and bring the light to the world, because as Christ said, you are the light of the world. And as Yogananda says in the autobiography of the yogi, why did Christ say you are the light of the world? Because he says, without you, the world has no hope. And let this sink into you. Without all of you on this webinar right now, the world has no hope. Your families have no hope. No doubt some of you even have seen your families started to awaken. Would they have awakened without you? Probably not. No doubt, Steve, there's been a shift happening in some of your family members. Would that have happened otherwise? Probably not. Would the change have happened in Christine's family if Christine hadn't walked the path that she'd walked and then got involved and then started to tell her family? Probably not. Would Donna, Famita, everyone, Mark, Sheldon, without you guys, William, without you, your friends have got no hope. That's why Christ said, you are the light of the world. In fact, something that Sammy said to me this morning really triggered me, where she was saying she's been having a real awakening herself with the scriptures, and not with anything we said to her, just in her own being led and starting to read the Bible, and suddenly saying to me that some of her friends who've been showing her stuff full of fish, she goes, these people need Christ. They do. She goes, it's just hit me how badly they need Christ. I said, yeah, without you, I'll probably never meet him. So it says here in verse 8, then he said to me, these waters, and this is the river of God, rise, if you out towards the east country, and they go into the desert and they go into the sea, which being brought forth into the seas, the waters are healed. What's being said here is that the river that went out of the temple actually went into the Dead Sea. In other words, when you don't have that awakening of Christ or the higher indigo light in your heart, you are dead. This is what it says in Ephesians, and in Romans, it says you are dead. In other words, you are dead, trapped in the energies of the world. You're trapped in the mind control implants of the CIA, of the dark. You are trapped in the lower frequency energies of the Masons ruling over whatever's going on here. You are trapped in the dense energies of Satan and the chains of Satan, which are surrounding the earth. But it says that when the waters go out and go into this Dead Sea, that's why you are the light of the world, because when you go out and bring your light into the world, and the sea in scripture always represents the world, like, and the people around you, you see that in Revelation 13, where the beast come out of the sea, then instantly, the moment you bring your light, you are like an ark of the covenant. You're like a walking light beacon, but you bring instant light, instant awakening to those around about you, instantly. So without you, your people around you have no hope. Your kids have no hope. The waters shall be healed. And then it shall come to pass that everything that lives, which moves, wherever the river shall come, shall live. And there shall be a great multitude of fish, because these waters will come there, and they shall be healed, and everything shall live where the river comes. It shall come to pass that the fishers shall stand upon it, spread their nets, and there'll be many fish. But the miry places shall not be healed, for they shall be given to salt. So you can see the whole purpose that we hear just in those few verses. That when we are activated with the light of Christ and we're on our path and we're going out as the light of the world and spreading the power to give people hope and transformation in these times, you bring healing to people's hearts. You bring healing to their mind, to healing to their belief. People start to have faith again. People who are getting overwhelmed by the attacks from family and friends about the jab, about what's going on in the world, the fear and fright they're seeing with what governments are doing with the virus. You bring them hope, you bring them life, you bring them healing. I've had people say to me, you know, oh my gosh, the shedding with the jab, you know, what are you going to do? You know, how can you go and do this? I said, it doesn't worry me. I said, I'm the light. When I go there, it shrivels up. Instead of John G. Lake, one of the greatest healers who experienced Christ in an amazing way, John G. Lake, that Lake, wherever they went, Lake used to say, wherever I go, disease shrivels up. That was his knowing. He just says, when I go there, disease can't function when I'm around. He had power over sickness, disease, and death. Christ was the same. In fact, they even did an experiment where they got a microscope and got John G. Lake to do healing upon people who had cancer in hospitals, and they would actually see the cancer shrivel up under the microscope. Lake was known in Africa to empty hospitals. He'd go into hospitals and he'd leave, and there wouldn't be any patients. In other words, because he knew who he was. He knew the authority that he had over sickness and disease. Instead of Christ, Yeshua, he had authority over demon and spirits. And that's why it says the people were amazed at his authority, because he had authority over demons and over spirits. He would command them to leave and they would leave. He says in Matthew 28, he says, if you are my disciples, in other words, if you're following in the power and authority of Christ, of Yeshua, it says you will speak to demons and they will be kicked out. He says you will pray for the sick and they will recover. He said, you can drink deadly poison and it won't touch you. In other words, you could have someone pin you down and put a vaccine into you and it won't even affect you. It said of the Apostle John, who was the closest with Christ, but when Emperor Domitian did the persecution and ordered John to be taken out, and they were going to boil him in oil in public to make an example of him, to force people to basically come on board with the Roman Empire religion. But John was put into the boiling oil and he sat there smiling. Eventually Domitian pulled him out and he was completely unharmed. And all the people said, he is a god, and fell on their knees and accepted Christ. And Domitian freaked out and ordered that John be taken into exile. And he was taken to Crete on a ship and locked away there for 2 years. On that island of Crete was where John wrote the Book of Revelation. So that's a bit of interesting history for you. As he was on that island in exile, living on his own, he wrote the Book of Revelation after that miracle. So that's the power of it. So the river, there's 3 stages here. The river goes towards the East Country. In other words, that's like the hero's journey, seeking that place where God's glory dwells. Then into the desert, the wilderness. So this is kind of like the hero's journey summarized in 3 stages, which we all went through at some stage. And then it enters the sea. In other words, gets into the world, and everywhere when you enter into the sea, the waters are healed. So that's why this stage 15 and 16, the most exciting part of this journey, this is the moment where you enter the sea. This is when you go back into your Monday affairs, this time's a different man or woman to be the light of the world. And right now, what better time than now to be the light of the world? I mean, the world is just absolutely in a shithole. What a great time right now to be a messenger of light. And it's said that the angels, I can remember when in 2006, I was driving my car and Charles Finney, who's one of my most revered and loved evangelists, one of the greatest evangelists or teachers of the gospel of Christ and the power in America. The Bible Belt, still to this day in America, it's called the Bible Belt, all through that east of America, where Finney and on his horse and others went through. It said of Finney that in the days of no internet, in the days of no planes or cars, on a horse, saw over 1 million people come to Christ and become powerful, changed people, and 80% of them stayed through. Courts changed as a result of him being there. Bars shut down, pubs shut down, and places became places of prayer and meditation. That's why it became the Bible Belt. So powerful was the move of the Holy Spirit. And so I used to read every single book when I was a teenager and in my 20s that Finney had written to find out everything, discover his secrets, unlock them. And I remember in 2006, I was driving the car and I just felt this presence in my car. And next minute I knew that it was Charles Finney. I could see him and I just started to sob. And I could just feel the power and I couldn't stop sobbing. And I felt his love. And all I could say to him, I couldn't even hardly speak, but the one thing I was able to say was, all I want is to see the same in my country that you saw in your time. And all that Finney said to me back was, with a lot of love, he said, what I saw was nothing compared to what you will be seeing in your days. He said, it's nothing. He said, the awakening you will see in your country and in your cities will be like nothing that I saw in my time. It'll make it look like like a kindergarten. It will make it look like nothing. And I then saw the awakening, what it looked like. And I still to this day, I find it hard to put into words, but I saw everything change. I saw the political system changing. I saw judges being kicked out of courts for Masonic oaths. I saw courts being cleaned out. I saw people go back to their Bibles and just reading them en masses. I actually saw this in 2006. I saw people in business just taking control of the business and bringing ethical, conscious business. I saw the light being so great in Australia. I saw that everywhere you would go, you'd find people more interested in praying and more interested in reading books, sacred books, than they were in doing anything else. I saw a revival of the music and arts. I saw stuff and almost unspeakable things that I saw. I saw it preceded by a great breaking down, which is what we're seeing now, but I saw this come out of it. And that's why I was told this morning that we're in the beginning of this awakening now. What I was told is that people are starting to awaken, but there's still a lot more work to go because there's still much deadness of hearts. There's still too much of people striving in their own strength. But we can do this. We, the people, know we can't do anything. We can't do jack shit. Only thing that can change this is an awakening of our hearts and consciousness that is so powerful, but so large that nothing can come against it. That's why it says in Isaiah 59, it says exactly that. It talks about the breakdown of consciousness in society in Isaiah 59. And it says, I'll just get it up actually now. So it says, yeah, it goes through a whole big thing about the breakdown. But it says here in verse 19, so shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, which is what's happened right now. But notice that they will fear a higher vibrational name, because the name of the Lord in ancient mystery school is like the consciousness vibrational coding from the west, the Western world, from the west. And for some of us right now, we're physically in the rest. The Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him, and the Redeemer shall come to Zion. But notice this, unto them that turn from transgression in Jacob, says the Lord. In other words, the Redeemer does not come to those who do not turn from transgression. Those who say, I want the Redeemer to come to our land, but I'm just going to keep living like I have because I'm perfectly entitled to. You have more breaking down to come yet. And that is where much of the world is at right now. And that is why you are the light of the world. Everyone here in this webinar, listening to this message, you're the light of the world. That is why things are happening. That is why you're being sent. There's awakenings happening in people right now. I'm still mind blown. I mean, I cannot believe what's happening myself just from the last 24 hours speaking to Sammy. What's going on with her? Because I said, this is not any man telling you this. You're hearing directly from the Holy Spirit what you're being told right now. But she's being led to the Bible, being led to Christ, being led to the Holy Spirit right now without me even talking to her. And, I was trying for 2.5 years to show her stuff and I just given up. But that's because God has a way of reaching people. But still, without you bringing your light and bringing your consciousness to the people around you and telling people that they must turn from transgression. And when you read that Christ said, turn from transgression and get baptized. That's why we water baptize many people here. If you haven't been water baptized yet, go and do it. Get someone to baptize you. Yep, I mean, God reached you when you're in solitude on your own. Yeah, Yvonne, who many of you know does a coach for me, 18 months, 2 years ago. She just said she'd been involved in all kinds of different stuff and Sanskrit stuff, and Yeshua appeared to her and told her very clearly, I want you to become a Christian and want you to get water baptized. And she said the moment she did, she was filled with the Holy Spirit and was different. Because I hadn't known that at first, but when I reconnected with her a year or so ago, I said, you're different, Yvonne. I said, what's happened to you? You're different to when I knew you a few years ago. And that was what she told me. So right now, this awakening is happening. They shall fear the name of the Lord. That's why they're moving so hard. They're panicking. Those of the dark and of the sons of Belial, they're absolutely freaking out. They can see the awakening happening. So expect it to get horrifically a lot worse very quickly over the next little while as they will pull out every string in their bow to attack. And that is why more than ever, let your light shine and do not fear, what you see going on in the world. That's what it says in Matthew 24, Luke 21. He goes, it says the hearts of men and women, Jesus warned, he said their hearts will fail from fear. People will die from heart attacks with the horrors of what they will see in days ahead. People will have nightmares day after day. People will be living in constant terror all the time of what they're seeing, because they will be seeing things get worse. This is nothing what we're seeing yet. You will see signs in the skies. It says you'll see hurricanes, you'll see earthquakes, you'll see bombs being launched and places just blowing up. You'll see it on the news more and more. You'll be hearing stuff that you would almost not have thought was possible to hear in your lifetime. But Christ said, if you're his sheep, do not fear these things, for these things must come to pass. He says this in Luke 21. In Luke 21, he says this. In fact, I'll just quickly show you this. So he goes on here. He says, but not a hair of your head shall perish. He says, you'll be hated by all men. But he says here, he says there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and the stars and upon the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves warring. In other words, tidal waves. You'll see, like, don't be surprised if you see Los Angeles, California go under the ocean. Things like Nostradamus has prophesied, crazy shit. It says what you will see, and men's hearts will fail them for fear, looking for the things that will come upon the earth. The powers of heaven will be shaken, and they will see the Son of Man coming into power with great glory. But when these things come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draws nigh. In other words, this is a time you go, this is great. I've never enjoyed living on earth as I have in 2021. The earth did not make sense to me in the past. I'd be seeing the energies, I'd be seeing the spirits and the evil, and I couldn't understand. The world around me seemed normal. Now as the world falls apart, it makes sense to me. It's everything that I've seen. These are the greatest days in Earth's history, and we are witnessing being part of the greatest awakening that's ever been seen. I'm telling you, we're entering into it over the next coming years. And you see this in Matthew 21. Jesus warned as well. He said, you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. In other words, you're going to hear of the Middle East. You're going to hear of someone bombing someone, and someone else will bomb someone else, and someone else will go to war with someone else. But he said, don't you be troubled. These things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdoms. So he just says all this will happen. And in fact, he says there will be great tribulation that was not seen since the beginning of the world. So, and there's even a warning of false Christ, false prophets, idiots, antichrist. And you can read this, and this is a whole different message that will come up. So we're in the most exciting times of that literally we could almost imagine possible. So this is when we do this. And all of them, Yeshua, Buddha, Merlin, all of these walk through this hero's journey. And finally, to finish off, everything can be summarized from what I just said about being the light of the world, Ezekiel about the river of life, is what Yeshua said in John 7:37, when he says, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink, for out of our bellies shall flow rivers of living water. And he's referring to Ezekiel 47 because the center of the temple was within your tantien, or your belly, your higher heart, your brain. And even the Chinese and the Tao know this, and that's why they get breathing through the tantien, right in that belly, because out of your belly shall flow rivers of living water. That is why when you start to speak out from your power, when your solar plexus chakra gets activated and you find your power, find your purpose, find your mission, and start to sing from the depths of your soul, you start to celebrate and bring the light of Christ to the world. Out of your belly flows rivers of living water, and people don't see it, but they feel themselves being refreshed. They don't know how it's happening to them. I've noticed the more I do this, I have people saying to me, I don't know why it is, but when I'm around you, I have hope. And I'm like, well, it's nothing to do with me. I'm a bit of a numbnut, but it's the power of Christ that comes out of me. I've had numerous people been saying this to me lately, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. That shows that Christ is moving more through me, because because there's no way that I can do that with people, because I can't. And those who've known me in times past know that when I'm not fully on my path with Christ, I'm actually a bit of a pain in the ass. You know, Jesus described us as temples of God. This illustrates the anointing, how we bring life to all around us and healing by our voice, and our very presence is the ark of God. So go out this week and realize that you're a messenger of the good news to people. In other words, people right now are shitting themselves, and they should be. Things are breaking down. The only way through is to come through the highway of holiness, to enter the portal, to enter into the light, and to come through into that new way of being. And how will they know if you don't go? If you don't go and tell people, if you don't show people the way, if Grace and I hadn't come and told and shown you about getting baptized and taught you this stuff, you wouldn't have known it either. If someone hadn't come and taught me when I was younger, I wouldn't have known it either. If my aunt and uncle hadn't sat down and shared with me, and if my aunt hadn't sat down with me and forced me to listen to her, which she did, my aunt would sit down and make me sit down and listen to her. And I'm so grateful that she did, because she would teach me the scriptures. She taught me the higher truths. You know, we are the light of the world. A city cannot be hidden. Without you, the world has no hope. And that's what Christ said. If you believe in me, out of your heart flows rivers of living water. Okay. So, went quite more powerfully or different to what I even expected. So I just want to let you think about it and what this means for you this week. Where are you going to be going from here? Really reflect and contemplate. And contemplate the words you've heard today. Some of them which I came to teach, some of them just really weren't me. I felt the power of the Holy Spirit and Christ just take over today. So just contemplate the words that you've heard. And just ask yourself, what actions am I being called to take in my life right now? What's the inner witness of Spirit saying to me? If you haven't been baptized, definitely do that. If you have been, how can you get out there and be a light to those around you? Just what can you do? It can be and that can take so many forms. It could just be to be a greater example in your business. It could be to tell your friends. It could just be to show people a better way forward so that people stop being scared what's going on. There's many ways. It could be to help people with their finances. It could be just an amazing parent with your kids. There'll be something. Just see what you're getting and just allow it to come to you. And when you're ready, just type it in the text chat, or if you feel to take the mic, just type mic. Miko's just processing. Yeah, I'm just going to give people a couple of minutes to process, but thanks for that, Miko. It's going to give you a couple of minutes to keep processing until you're ready. Just going to go and get some more water while everyone's doing it. Okay, so people still processing, I can sense. Who here is still processing, or has anyone got anything to share? Sheldon, those who wish to be the greatest must be the servant of all. Resonated with me. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? When you read Isaiah 35, Sheldon, you realise why Christ moved in such great miracle power. Because he really did it with compassion, and he came to serve. Just keep processing your lesson. Anyone else had any lessons?
Yeah, Warren, I think for me, that metaphor of the river of life flowing out into the Dead Sea is really powerful.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you don't actually know who you can touch, what the consequences might be for that person. Yeah. So it's just a matter of not totally retreating for me. It's pretty easy for me to retreat.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to speak your truth goes back to speaking your truth, doesn't it, really?
Oh, absolutely.
And for me, what I've learned so much in this last few months even. It's like it's speeding up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really quite remarkable. I feel as if I'm having a deeper understanding, and you've sort of brought quite a lot of it together today as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really, and it says where not a hair of your head shall perish or something like that. It makes you realise that if you really are honest and speaking the truth, and as Steve said, if it comes from your heart, that's the big thing, isn't it, really? That's what will make a difference.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Steve says the message of service to others really stands out for me. Yeah. It seemed to come through pretty strongly today, Steve. I agree. I knew as soon as I started preparing this message last night, there was going to be something important to share today. I could just feel it. Next week, when we speak, we'll be speaking on the Master of Two Worlds, which is going to be that stage when you're actually into that mastery, where you start to really work the spiritual and material together. And that's when you experience true abundance, not just in the financial area, which will be inevitably abundant, but every area of your life. But you're doing it with a service as well. Yeah, Alex was the same. So yep, seems pretty common. Anyone else before we end today? I felt led to put this code up just to let it activate while we're finishing off.
Yeah, Warren, the other thing that stood out for me was that I think it was a Joseph Campbell thing about reintegrating back into the world from the hero's journey.
Yeah.
You know, I think the big thing in that is it gives hope. You know, because going through the dark night of the soul, the valley of despair, and even the different times of the hero's journey, it's confronting, and it can be, because it's challenging, right? It can be, I don't know, depressing in a way. You know, it can be difficult, and so hearing that today, that it's kind of light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. It offers hope, I think, which is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
What code's this, by the way?
It's called the Greater Masters of the Son of Egypt or something like that.
Oh, wow.
It's nice, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Gosh.
Okay, everyone. Well, I feel just to end it there and let you go away and just think about it all. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. So bye for now, and just allow yourself to be led over the next few days and see where this takes you.